Welcome to TV Tangents with your hosts, Natalie and Rebecca. Today on the program, we're talking about the beloved 80s sitcom, Newhart.
I like how on Prime it will sometimes let me skip the intro, but other times it won't let me skip the intro.
I always get to skip the intro.
And it would say it just wouldn't show up on there. And I was like, oh, I guess I'll listen to it now. So
yeah, so now it's in your head.
It's a good one.
Meow. Meow. So last week we started talking about the program Newhart, which Natalie had never seen.
No.
And now she's seen it, and she's hooked as we all are.
It is so good.
We're talking about Michael and Stephanie and how they break up all the time. Mm-hmm. Finally, in season 6, Michael asks Stephanie to be his cuter half. And then they plan a big wedding, and they're like, it's going to be like next week. And then at the altar, they decide that they just want to be engaged forever because they love being engaged. It's their favorite thing. So then they break up after that. They break up like a million times more. And eventually in season 7, they elope.
Yeah, I almost forgot about the whole big wedding thing. And then it was like, one, that's a thing where like Stephanie then wouldn't have all the attention on her anymore if that's over with. And yeah, there was a lot of stuff. I think in the beginning too, wasn't there, they wanted her parents wanted Michael to sign a prenup.
Yes.
And there was just a ton because they'd go visit that house quite a bit, which I also found funny because like Dick and Joanna would also go and visit, you know, Stephanie's family and
the Vanderkellens.
So yeah, their whole dynamic was so funny. And then just every time they broke up and got back together, and you just knew it wasn't going to. Any breakups weren't going to last.
Oh, of course.
They were just super cute and belonged together.
I felt like they were the secondary stars of the show, maybe even the primary star of the show. Like, don't we tune in to see what Michael's going to say and what Stephanie's going to do? They're kind of like the Jack and Karen in Will and Grace.
That's very true.
It's like the show's not supposed to be about them.
Yeah.
But it is.
But it is because it's kind of like, I think we talked about this in the last episode where Dick and Joanna have a great dynamic. Dick is funny because Bob Newhart is funny and he has his way of delivering lines and everything. And I think there was one where they did a spoof on his previous character from the Bob Newhart show. And they said something about, the show where there was a guy who had a stutter or whatever, and Bob or Dick gets all mad about it, and he's like, it's like a pause or whatever. But the way he delivers lines is so funny, and we kind of talked about Joanna, same thing. But yeah, they're definitely not. They don't have a huge storyline other than they're the owners of the inn, and there's a lot of stuff that goes on around, but yeah, they definitely, it's almost like Stephanie and Michael became kind of the main attraction.
That's true. So I have some lines that I wrote down because they cracked me up so bad. Michael at one point says, Dick, I just saw my lifestyle flash before my eyes. That's what I'm going to use. Because I think it was like he was losing his job.
Oh,
he lost his job for a while at this TV station. So yeah. And a line that Dick uses on Michael that I'm going to use at work is, I'm sorry we had a chance to chat. He was always saying stuff like that under his breath that the other characters would just walk off. Like they didn't catch it, but
that's awesome.
Hilarious. And Larry briefly has a love interest named Kathy. Remember, he was dating a woman named Kathy. Very briefly.
I do kind of remember that.
She'd been left by her fiance and she had like checked into the inn.
Oh, yeah.
And they were going to run away together. And he says to her, I know this must sound crazy. you being a tasty bag of groceries and all.
Oh, Larry was so good at that too.
A tasty bag. He was
being a
so
tasty bag of
sincere.
groceries
He's
and
like,
all.
I'm trying so hard to be like the Larry and Daryl had their reality that they're like everybody's life is like this, right?
Yeah.
Like this is everybody. And he was always so sincere.
He was.
So those are a couple lines.
I loved the part where Michael, when he did, I believe, get fired, he wanted to be a mime.
Yeah.
And
amazing.
he said something to the effect of, well, if everybody loves a mime. And I think it was Dick who says, everybody loves a clown. People try to run over mimes.
And Stephanie is dating a guy who takes her to
Yes.
a nice restaurant and
he's out there being the mime. Oh, my God.
then he runs in and starts yelling at them and they're like, mimes don't talk.
Exactly.
It was so great. He is
that
so
was the
good.
best, yeah.
There's one episode, which is a trope that I love in sitcoms, where they all have their own dreams. Mm-hmm. And Michael dreams that he's a network executive. And the dream is in fast forward. Because, like, that's how Michael's brain works.
Yeah.
So it's just a little bit fast and everything's, like, all, jittery. And Dick is the devil in the dream. And then in Larry's dream, he's filling in for Johnny Carson.
Yes. Yes. I do remember that one.
There's a point where George says that when he's blue or depressed, he watches It's a Mad, 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 Mad World to cheer him up. But then he gets sad again when he thinks about all the actors who are dead. And I was like, oh my God, George, same.
Exactly. Same,
Exactly
George.
what I go
Same.
through.
Watch 'em
Also,
all.
another relatable is that Joanna is afraid of the eye doctor.
Oh, yes.
Remember that?
Yes.
And I'm afraid of the dentist. And
Yeah,
I know you're
I'm
afraid of the eye
definitely
doctor.
afraid of the eye doctor. I am.
Which is
indeed.
funny. That's my job.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm not an eye doctor, but
Exactly.
it's okay. So my favorite episode is season 7, episode 21. It's called Murder at the Stratley. And I remembered it almost word for word from the first time I saw it 30 years ago. It's where Dick writes a mystery novel with characters from the town, and he's insisting that it's not them.
Yeah.
He's like, it's totally different. Everything is different. And then in it, like the Joanna character, who I don't remember what he named her like Jana or something. Like it was very obvious. She goes to she gets killed. So when this happens, Joanna has gone to visit her mother, and she got on the train to visit her mother. And then everyone thinks that Dick has murdered her. So they all show up at the inn, and
Because
the
isn't she
lights
like
go
get
out.
held up or something, like she was supposed to be
Right.
back?
So he just dropped her off at the train station and left, and like in the pouring rain. And
Yes.
something happened where like she couldn't get into the train station. Like the train had been shut down or whatever. And she had to walk back home because she couldn't get a hold of him.
Yeah.
And yeah, she's like, you just like pushed me out of the car and drove off, which is another like example of how those two are always at each other. And so the lights go out and everybody's in the inn and like accusing Dick of murdering Joanna. And he's like, yeah, fine, I did it. I killed my wife and whatever. And then she comes in and there's like lightning and everything, and she's all drenched in rain, and
Yeah.
they think it's her ghost because she's like, Dick Loudon. And at one point, Chester is yelling, Thomas Hillbridge is out. Thomas Hillbridge is out. Well, Thomas Hill is the name of the guy who plays Jim.
Oh. That's
I love
awesome.
that episode. It was
Oh my
so
God.
cute.
That was a good one. I remember that one.
So what about guest stars? I know you like to list the guest stars. So what have you got for me?
I do. And it's so funny because sometimes when I don't look people up, then I just write down who they were on some other show. But this must be early on because it's like the second thing I wrote, that Rue McClanahan played George's old girlfriend.
He had a lot of old girlfriends.
Yes,
he had
he
a
did.
lot of romances.
Yes. And it doesn't help that. And then I just wrote down that Jerry Van Dyke was an interviewer. Is that when Joanna went to go get a job as like I almost said vacation person. What's that called? Travel agent. Oh my God.
Vacation person.
She was going to go get a job, and Jerry Van Dyke was the interviewer, and still very Jerry Van Dyke about it.
Which is
too.
funny because Jerry Van Dyke had auditioned for the role of George.
Oh,
which would not have
interesting.
made sense. He would have been a goofy handyman.
Yes, and he would have taken over a little bit. Yeah, it would have been more physical comedy for sure. It is funny because there was an episode of Columbo apparently that had a murderer writer, and I just said it's Kurt's grandma. So again, I write things like that down when I don't know people's names. But Joanna's mom was played by, and see, now I can't think of her name in real life, even though I know it. She did play Caroline Brady on Days of Our Lives.
Okay, well,
But she played Joanna's mom, of course, and she has since passed. Dave Coulier was on.
he was.
An
He was
episode.
on the season 3 episode Prodigal Daryl.
Yes.
When Daryl took his share of the money they got for writing a jingle and he moved to the big city. I love that episode.
Yep. I was like, they were looking for Daryl, and he was like in the.
He was with Dave Coulier because he had a fancy hotel room.
That's right. That's right. And then is it when did Dick did he write something where he had his pen name was like Dwight Schmidlap or something like that?
Let's see that one.
Because all I
might have
wrote
skipped it.
is this is something about he, and so I wrote Mr. Heckles is in the pool hall when Dick is Dwight Schmidlap. So again, because I watched
been a
this
while.
a while ago, literally these are the kind of notes I write sometimes. Crazy lady that stalls Joe on wings worked at the cafe and Larry was in love with her. See, I write weird
Cute,
things like
cute,
that
cute.
because, and then I forget to go back.
That's Kathy. That was the lady that he was going to run away with.
Yes. Shelley Fabre was on.
From Father Knows Best.
Yes, and Coach.
I know.
I was like,
I'm just
like,
saying.
what?
I'm just going back farther.
Oh, and then I like the one where they're at the Beaver Lodge and they said something about like why Michael was responsible for like a Gilligan's Island marathon. And the whole time Russell Johnson is part of the group and he's the professor from
Yeah.
Gilligan's Island.
Awesome.
And he's in the
That's so
episode
funny.
and they're like making references to it all the time. And I'm
Michael's
like, oh my
always
God.
making TV references.
Yeah.
I love it. George finds his only living relative. I don't know if you noticed this. His cousin Eugene, played by Derek McGrath, who was Oswald Valentine, Sue Ellen's lingerie business partner on Dallas.
Oh.
And he was also a waiter in another episode. And I was like, okay, is this the guy from Dallas?
Interesting.
Because he's kind of like not distinct looking.
Mhm.
But I was like, that guy, that's the guy. That's who it is.
Wow.
Derek McGrath.
Yes.
Johnny Carson shows up. Larry, Daryl, and Daryl are telling Dick that Johnny Carson pays their
bill.
bill. And I'm like, what is the joke here? They keep saying Johnny Carson pays their gas bill, but what do they mean?
Right.
Like, is it a fake Johnny? Is someone saying they're Johnny Carson? No, it's actually Johnny Carson.
Actually, Johnny Carson.
And he shows up at the end, and Dick's like, okay.
Yeah.
And of course, he doesn't like Dick because nobody does.
Nobody likes Dick.
Dick gets a new show, and Michael hires Julie Brown, the comedian, not
Yeah.
the VJ, as his co-host, Buffy Denver. And I thought this character was so funny when I was a kid. She's so perky and weird, and Dick makes her cry.
Yes.
Loved that.
That was awesome. Oh, that Kathy Kinney is on several episodes. That she's on the Drew Carey show. Who does she play? The one with all the makeup. Mimi,
Yeah,
is that her
Mimi.
name on Drew
Yes,
Carey? So she's
yes,
in several episodes, and
She was a full-on cast member.
Yeah, she was definitely.
I love her. She was the reason I watched the Drew Carey show because she was so funny. We should watch that show. She was so funny on that show. And she was so good on this show. She was one of my favorite characters on this show. But she was only there from like 1989 to 1990.
Yeah, I was gonna say it was only on, and then it was like I think Drew Carey started right after that or something.
95.
Oh, was it that much longer
Yes.
after? I thought I was looking it up, and I'm like, maybe.
5
Did you
years.
see when so Michael and Stephanie end up having a baby, of course.
Yes, baby Stephanie.
Little baby Stephanie. And did you see the cameo appearances that saying how they'll be wonderful parents?
Yes, that was great. So at the end of
Yeah.
that episode, they had other TV characters.
Yes.
Because Michael was going around with a video camera having people say how excited they were about the baby. And Dick was like, I don't want to.
Yeah.
And then so at the end, they showed
They got
actual
Jessica
characters.
Fletcher
Yes.
made an appearance
Yes.
from Murder, She Wrote, of course.
Was it?
And Bobby Ewing
Yes.
makes an appearance and what says you guys will be such great parents.
Yes.
And I was like,
That's
oh my God.
That's what it was. They were like, tell us that we'll be great parents. And Dick's like, I'm not saying that. It was really great.
That was awesome.
I loved it. Let's talk about the cast, shall we?
Yes.
So Bob Newhart plays Dick Loudon, the owner of the Stratford Inn, and he is the author of how-to books and travel books, and later he becomes the host of Vermont Today. But the real person, George Robert Newhart, was born September 5th, 1929 in Oak Park, Illinois. And if you want to hear his bio, you can listen to our episode on the Bob Newhart Show to find out how he rose from accountant to pop culture icon, who is still to this day being on TV and doing things. And
yes,
he's awesomely hilarious.
He's very much the same kind of guy too, but he's just so, It's like, how are you a dynamic actor when you really don't change that much? And yet he is. He's able to deliver dry lines and just be funny. And
that's just, it seems like he's not a great actor, but then like if you see interviews with him or like if you see the outtakes from Newhart, he's a like much more animated person in real life.
That's true.
Than he is on the show. He's very straightforward in the show.
Very true.
And grumpy. He wasn't as grumpy in the beginning.
No.
But it became funny.
Yeah.
So Mary Fran plays Joanna Loudon, who is Dick's wife. And she becomes a realtor later. Remember she sold a house to that, or she was trying to sell a house to a guy who it turns out had like a shrine to her in his house.
That's right.
The character is originally from Ohio, but she and Dick lived in New York. So Mary Frances Lukey, I don't really know how to say her last name, was born February 27th, 1943 in St. Louis, Missouri. And she was 14 years younger than Bob Newhart. Because, we got to have a super young wife.
Yeah. Although on the show, that wasn't that crazy obvious.
No, they never really say. Although at one point, Dick says that George is 56. And then on another episode, he says he and George are the same age. But you don't really notice what Bob's age is. Or sorry, what Dick's age is. Yeah. It's very hard to tell.
Yeah. And they kind of just made it work. Yeah, it wasn't overly obvious.
It was never discussed. She was a model as a child and appeared in commercials. And when she was 18, she won the title of America's Junior Miss, earning a scholarship to Northwestern University.
Oh, hey.
But she dropped out after a year and moved to Chicago to co-host a morning television show.
Well, there you go.
And from 1974 to 79, she played Amanda Howard on Days of Our Lives.
Woo!
After guesting on a few other shows, she was considered for the role of Sue Ellen Ewing on Dallas.
I did read that.
Did you know
what?
That is so funny. She would have been a really good Sue Ellen.
She would have been, yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Her last acting role was one episode on the series Beyond Belief, Fact or Fiction, which aired 2 years after her death. And she passed away in her sleep on September 23rd, 1998 from a heart attack.
That's crazy.
It is crazy.
You don't 55?
She was in her 50s, very young. You don't think about women having heart attacks. Yeah. And it was very sad.
That is very sad.
And I did not know that. Until
which is weird because I always look up everybody's ages and I knew their age, and then when you just said that, I didn't remember that she had passed. That's crazy.
I didn't know until I started watching the show, and I would look things up and I'm like, "Oh, wait a minute. I didn't know that Mary Fran died in 1998, which is sad."
That is crazy.
Then Tom Poston is George Utley, which is the handyman who I guess was bought with the inn. I don't know. Like he just came with it.
Just comes with it.
He was born in Columbus, Ohio on October 17th, 1921. I said 1991.
You said 21.
1921. He served as a pilot in World War II on an aircraft that dropped paratroopers for the Normandy invasion. After the war, he studied acting in New York City. He had several movie and TV roles before playing the Peeper on his good friend Bob Newhart's show. The Bob Newhart Show. He had like a friend who was always messing around.
Yes, I did remember reading that.
He was married 4 times. In 2001, he married Suzanne Plachette,
I remember reading that
who
too.
played Bob's wife, Emily,
In the Newhart
in the first
show,
series.
Bob Newhart show.
And he passed away in 2007 at 85. And then Suzanne Plachette passed away 9 months after that. Not sad.
Super sad.
She was younger than him, like 10 years younger than him. Who is your favorite character, by the way? We didn't discuss that yet.
We didn't. You know what's so funny is, like, since we discussed this in the beginning of the first episode that we talked about this, is that I really like Joanna, probably because I am Joanna and I'm like the keeper of the inn.
So you agree that in this scenario, you're the Joanna and I'm the Dick?
I think so. Okay. Yeah. Right. And I like that I just like her because, again, I feel like she does a lot with very little. She doesn't get a lot of different things. I mean, she definitely gets some storylines, but she kind of like keeps everybody under control. She's the one, like, you know, Stephanie goes to her for advice, even though they're not really. And then I think at one point, Joanna's like, well, are we friends? Can't we go out? And she's just kind of like, oh, you're old or whatever. And because, you know, Stephanie being Stephanie. But
it's so funny how Stephanie puts her down so much, puts down her sweaters, puts down her hair. I'm like, excuse me. She's a freaking model.
Yeah. I was going to say she's
about?
Gorgeous. So, yeah.
And
it
her
is
sweaters are great.
Very 80s.
Although, again, I don't know where she keeps them all.
That's true. Again, they have these really giant rooms for being hotel rooms.
Remember how we used to put shoulder pads in our sweaters in the 80s? Like, you would just have, like, a drawer with your socks and your shoulder pads, and then you'd, like, pin them into your sweaters.
Yeah, and then they started making them with Velcro, so you could just Velcro
those
them
were
in.
great.
It was
Yeah.
great.
So Julia Duffy plays Stephanie Vanderkellen, who we said is Leslie's cousin. And Julia Margaret Hines was born in Minneapolis in 1951 and had 3 older sisters. And she started acting in local productions as a child. She graduated from the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in 1972. Early in her career, she appeared on soap operas like One Life to Live.
Did know that.
And in 1982, she appeared in 1 episode of Cheers after having been considered for the role of Diane Chambers. Which would have been different. But it would have been more like her designing women character.
Yeah.
Than her. Because I always think of her as Stephanie. But then when I see her in other roles where she's not doing the Stephanie voice, I'm like, oh, that's right. She's just a regular person.
Yeah, that's true.
I forgot.
Yeah, I forgot until I started watching it and her being on there. I forgot how prominent she was on Designing Women there for a little while. And I was just like, oh, yeah, I remember when I watched that. So
she has 2 children. At least one of them she carried in her belly on the set of Newhart and hid behind pillows and boxes because they weren't ready for.
I started to see it and I was like, oh, I got to look it up. I'm pretty sure she's pregnant. And I'm like, yep, I'm right.
But why didn't they just have Michael and Stephanie get together and then be like, oh, look.
It's like that always happens when the writers aren't ready.
Right. But like they could have been because at that point they had already been engaged once.
Right. And then the second time she's actually pregnant, they do write it in, except it's like off timing, except they kind of sped it up. And
that's right.
Then
because they went on their honeymoon.
Yeah.
And come back and she's very pregnant.
And it was the break of the seasons too.
Yes.
And it was like, because I'm pretty sure at that point in real life, she gave birth in like when they would have started to have to film for the new season. And so then it was like they came back. But then it was like she had a fake pregnancy. Or so I remember that whole thing. I was like, okay, she was pregnant in real life. Now what's going on here? Like what's happening? And then they just went with it. So it was like, okay.
That always makes me think of like, do you go to your, producer's office and be like, hey, guess what? I'm pregnant. Or like, does your agent tell them, or how does it? Because I know, there was a point where I had to go and tell my boss, and this is not a joke. I'm actually pregnant. And so we're going to have some issues, but
yeah. But when they have to write it into something, then you kind of have to, I'm sure there's a whole negotiation part. There's probably some legal parts for that.
I know, right?
Especially if they're an actor or an actor. Well, I guess actress.
Yeah. It's an interesting dynamic. So Peter Scolari plays Michael Harris, who is the neurotic producer of Vermont Today. And he started doing voice acting for animation at the age of 13. Peter Scolari did, while he was still in high school.
Oh.
And he acted in plays at his high school in Scarsdale. In 1979, he moved to Los Angeles and starred in a failed pilot called The Further Adventures of Wally Brown. And then he finally had his moment when he starred with Tom Hanks in the sitcom Bosom Buddies. Back, for you young kids, back when Tom Hanks was not just a household name, he was just a guy who was in funny movies and sitcoms and Splash. But we're not talking about Tom Hanks.
No.
So Bosom Buddies ran until 1982, and then 2 years later, he was added to the cast of Newhart. And he passed away from leukemia in 2021, which was probably not sudden for people around him because he had leukemia,
right.
But it took me by surprise, and it was very sad.
I know. I hate that when I'm watching shows and then all of a sudden I'm like, this person's young. Let me look up what they're doing now. And then you're like, oh.
And then we're like George and we're all sad.
I know. Exactly.
William Sanderson played Larry, who was the woodsman who lived with his brothers. He was born in Nashville, and most recently he's been on shows like True Blood and Deadwood.
Oh.
Neither of which I watched.
No. Me neither.
His brother Daryl, with the dark hair, was played by Tony Pappenfuss. And his other brother Daryl was played by John Volstad. And you'll love to hear this because I know you love this. The three brothers, quote unquote, are still close friends to this day.
Oh, yay.
Yes. They take over the Minuteman Cafe following Kirk's departure, and the two Daryls never speak. The whole point until the very last episode,
end, yes.
Which is hilarious. Jennifer Holmes played Leslie Vanderkellen, who is an heiress and is at Dartmouth College. I'm not really sure why she's working as a maid. I don't remember. I think she wanted to be a normal person.
Yeah.
Because she was a good person.
She was a good person.
She was like the opposite of Stephanie.
Yeah. Polar opposites.
And Steve Campman plays Kirk Devane, who's a pathological liar, which is so funny. But he was too mean. Before Newhart, Stephen Campman was a writer on WKRP in Cincinnati.
Oh.
Stephanie's mom, Marion Vanderkellen, is played by Priscilla Merill. And you may remember she played Edie Grant in 5 episodes of the Mary Tyler Moore Show. Because every time I watch her come on the screen, I'm like, what is she from? She's very distinct. She has a very distinct voice.
Yes.
She was also Mother Isabel on Santa Barbara. And she was Mrs. Ritzendo on 4 episodes of Coach.
Yes. I was trying to think. I'm like, there's something else we watched that she was in. Yep.
She's all over the place. A lot of these actors are in a lot of things.
I love that when they bring people, especially that I feel like sometimes parents that are kind of recurring roles that happen once every, couple times a season. Mm-hmm. They always bring in somebody that was famous from other sitcoms. That always makes me happy when they do that.
One guest star we forgot to mention that we will get to in the final episode is Lisa Kudrow.
Ah.
And you can barely see her because, old TV set. Mm-hmm. But she plays Daryl's wife in the finale, his wife, Seda.
Mm-hmm.
Hilarious.
Yes.
And she looks kind of like her character in Romeo and Michelle's in that episode. Remember in Romeo and Michelle's?
Yeah.
When they flash back to when they're in high school. Oh. She's got kind of a Madonna thing going on. That's what she looks like in the final episode.
Interesting.
Okay, so here are the shows you missed on Monday, May 21st, 1990, because you couldn't tear yourself away from the Newhart finale. The last half of MacGyver.
Okay.
Night of 100 stars. I read that as Night of 1,000 stars, and then I was like, no, that's only 100 stars. Why are there only 100? Does that sound not right to you?
I don't even remember what that show was.
Me neither. Anyway, and 21 Jump Street.
Oh.
And that night, CBS had a crazy lineup of season finales. And you can check out our Patreon over at patreon.com/TV Tangents, where we will post the ad that appeared in TV Guide for May 21st, 1990.
Nice.
We had finales of Major Dad, Murphy Brown, and Designing Women.
Oh,
Just the season finales. And then it says, the last Newhart ever, or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Which is what it's called.
So in the last episode, Japanese investors, namely actor Getty Watanabe from 16 Candles and UHF, they want to buy the town to build a golf resort. And they're going to give everybody $1 million for their home. But Dick and Joanna refuse to sell.
Yes.
I don't know why. They even George.
They love
sells.
their life.
But
and
what
they're
does
like,
George sell? He doesn't own anything.
Okay, so that's what makes me wonder now that we're talking about that. Was his little spot separate? Now I don't,
It was part of the inn because Dick and Joanna owned it.
Right. Weird.
I don't know. Anyway, so everybody else
Or maybe they
sells.
pay them just to move out of the town.
Maybe
that's what it was. Yeah.
It's fine. So then we fast forward 5 years. And they're living on the 14th fairway of the golf course.
Yes.
And Joanna has fully integrated herself into Japanese culture to appeal to the guests, although she's dressed like as a full geisha. And absolutely no one else anywhere is dressed like this.
No.
It's hilarious. So the ending of this episode, the very ending, was the idea of Bob Newhart's wife, Ginny, who suggested at a party... They were at a party with Suzanne Plachette. They should do it like Bobby Ewing's dream in Dallas. She was like, remember Dallas? You should do it like that. It was all a dream. And Plachette loved the idea. But that was about 2 years before the final episode.
Oh, interesting.
And really, they could have gone on. Like, they didn't get canceled or anything. But Bob Newhart was like, nah, we got to go on and live our lives and do other things. What do you think of the finale? Of course, I had already seen it, so I wasn't surprised.
I'm not gonna lie, the build up made me think it was going to be this big thing that it wasn't. I guess is kind of my thought, because I saw so that's probably like a totally not reaction that most people have, saying it's one of the best of all time and all the things. I read all of those things before I had any idea what was going to happen.
P.S. Again, spoilers. If you don't want to know, you're gonna have to fast forward.
Yeah, fast forward through this if you don't want to know what happens. I'm like, because they're like, I was like, oh, it's not on there. I gotta find it. And you're like, oh, that's the one you have to watch.
Yeah. And
then of course when you Google it, it's like, oh my God, best finales of all time. And I was like, oh my God, what's gonna happen? I was so excited. And then I'm watching it and I'm like, okay, this is weird. The whole thing with them selling and all of the different things. And other than the chaotic scene where, the brothers are all come in and then they yell quiet at their wives and they actually speak for the first time. And Dick gets, he's all freaking out and then he gets hit in the head with a golf ball and he does the whole wee or whatever. And he kind of goes down like faints or whatever. So in the final scene, of course, he's in bed and that's when he just like turns over or something he's upset about. And then Suzanne Plachette is in the bed with him. And he's basically like, oh, I had this dream, Emily, like I owned this inn and blah, blah, blah. And he makes reference to this beautiful blonde that he was married to. And so I was kind of like, oh, that's really funny. But
it was anticlimactic. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah. I was like, I think I shouldn't have read anything. I almost didn't have a choice though, because again, when I had to Google it to find the episode, it was all like blah, blah, blah. And I really thought there was going to be something huge. And I almost wish I hadn't, because then I would have seen that and be like, oh my God, that's so funny. But I really was like, I don't understand what just happened. And I really like that part of it was great, but the rest of the episode was weird to me. And maybe it's because I didn't get enough like finality of the characters in general, like them getting to really have like their own, I like sitcoms where everybody's deciding what they're going to do and then they all get to hug each other. And then, Dick would be the last one out the door and that kind of thing.
But they got their hug. Because they were all like, okay, we're all leaving.
We're all leaving.
We're leaving you here.
Yeah.
And we're taking our $1 million and we're leaving. And so they all hugged. And you can see like the cast hugging the cast kind of thing. And then they come back and tell us immediately what their lives have been for the last couple years. Yeah. And like, that's great. I feel like that was closure. But maybe it's because you are watching it in 2023
Right.
when it has been emulated and spoofed. And so it's probably something you would expect. But I remember seeing it originally and it was, and even I was 15, like I said, and I was shocked.
Yeah.
And I had seen the Bob Newhart show, so I knew exactly what was going on.
Yeah.
If you'd never seen the Bob Newhart show, you wouldn't know what was going on.
Yeah, you'd be like, what the heck just happened? Who is
Right.
this?
But I thought it was hilarious too, like, because the characters and the plots got increasingly ridiculous as you went on into the show.
Yeah.
To where, like, there was the moment in the finale where Dick was like yelling at everybody because they're all deciding that they're going to stay at the inn and they're trying to figure out who's going to stay with who. And he's like yelling at them and he's like, isn't anybody listening to me? Like, you're all crazy and I don't understand. It was kind of like when you're in a dream and you're trying to find something and you can't find it, or like you're trying to run and your legs aren't going anywhere. And then he wakes up and he's and it's like, oh, of course it was a dream because it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like it was a cop out, but I feel like a lot of shows would have felt like a cop out. Like, of course, Bobby's thing was a cop out.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I don't know. Like the beginning part, I guess, of the finale in general, if it hadn't been all of that other stuff, maybe if it was more like some more bizarreness, but they had never like left, or like alleged people came back, or if they didn't go too. But you're right. Now thinking about it that way, it was to the extreme. And then all of a sudden the whole thing is a dream though.
Yeah.
Like so yeah, I don't know. It just was so, because again, I loved the show, and I don't know if again I read too much build up. I'm sure this is like a super unpopular opinion from
That's
everything
okay.
I've read.
Everyone I mean,
But
not
I legit
everyone
was
liked
like,
it.
I was just kind of like, oh, that just happened.
Well,
And I'm like,
originally, there was a decoy script that was sent out to the cast and crew, and it was leaked, quote unquote, to the press, in which Bob dies. He gets hit. Sorry, Dick. I keep calling him Bob. Dick gets hit in the head with the golf ball, and he dies, and he goes to heaven, and he's greeted by George Burns or George C. Scott.
Oh.
One of those two actors. I think they settled on George Burns. So that's what they thought was happening.
Oh.
Until the beginning of shoot day. Like, the cast and crew weren't told. Like, the cast was told in the morning about the new script, and then the crew was told later about what was actually happening.
Yeah.
Obviously not the crew that like built the set and did
Yeah.
other things, but like some of the crew.
Yeah.
But definitely the audience was in the dark because Suzanne Plachette was hidden in a trailer and she wasn't allowed to have a phone or anything because she was in secret. Nobody wanted, because obviously if you see Suzanne Plachette hanging out, you know what's happening.
Right.
Or you'd get an idea of what was happening.
Yeah.
So they built the set, they put a curtain in front of it, and then they like positioned the cameras where they needed to be so that nobody knew what was going on. And she had to just lay there in the bed and wait for her cue to talk, and they could only do one take because they needed to get the natural reaction of the audience.
Oh yeah.
And as soon as the audience, like the lights came on and the audience saw the bedroom, they
knew.
like recognized it.
Yeah.
And then when Emily sits up, like the audience is freaking out because they're like, oh my God. But yeah, like it's probably played out now. But at the time it was very new and original, and it was very shocking.
Yeah. That would be back. Yeah. When it actually happened, I could see that being more.
Yeah. It's hard to go back and think like what would have been happening at this time. There is a great interview online with Suzanne Plachette about the whole experience, and I will put the link in our show notes.
Sweet.
So this episode ran 35 minutes long, which is 5 minutes longer than it's supposed to. So some TV stations didn't get the memo, and they cut to commercial. And they cut off the entire final scene. So they had to run it again the following week so that people could
Oh my gosh.
see the finale.
Well, that's
Yeah.
something you would think they would have worked out ahead of time,
Right?
knowing that was the
Well,
most
they were
important
supposed
part.
to.
Yeah.
And in the end, you know, he's like, Emily, I had this crazy dream, and there were these woodsmen, and everybody was crazy, and I was married to this gorgeous blonde, and she's like, excuse me. And then he tells her, you should wear more sweaters.
I love it.
And that's the end.
Oh.
But I thought the finale was great, and it is one of my 2 favorite episodes. Like the mystery one is my first favorite, and then that one. Yep.
Yeah, it was definitely good. Like I said, just I guess for me, just anticlimactic. So I was like, meh.
But you're seeing it from a different perspective.
That's true. But great show. So great overall. I literally was like, I just started watching it and like I'm pretty, like, I don't even want to admit this because it makes me sound like a loser, but I'm pretty sure I watched it in like less than a month. It's like 24 days or something.
It's so easy to watch.
It was. Though. I was just like, I would just have it on. I'd have it on if I was at home. I just had it on.
And you don't even have to pay attention to get the jokes because, I watch it when I'm working and it's off to the side and I would just be laughing, like cackling out loud at stuff that people said.
Yeah.
You don't have to see what's going on.
No.
It's not like a physical slapstick humor.
Yeah.
It's
other than Dick's reactions.
True.
That's one of the biggest part of his comedy, though, too. Definitely is the faces he makes at people. That, like, tells you right there, that's what actually makes it funny. It's, like, his reaction. Because he's definitely, like, he will let you know you're stupid without saying a word. Yeah. So he's,
And it really seems like he and George are best friends. And I love that. Like, there's one where they're just sitting on the couch together, just kind of throwing jokes back and forth at each other. And
they're so cute.
They're cute. Well, I'm glad we got to watch this, and I'm glad you liked it.
I know.
I knew you would like it.
Yes.
I knew it. I was like, how have you not watched this?
I know. I can't believe it's like one of those where I seriously didn't even know, had no idea of what the concept even was. And then, bam, right away, just got sucked in.
Well, good thing we're living in a day and age where we can just watch whatever shows we want.
Yes.
We don't have to wait for them to come on TV.
Love it.
Do you have anything else to say about Newhart?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up and come see us on TikTok and Facebook. Join our Facebook group.
Yes.
We have a private group that you can get to through our Facebook page. And we also have a Patreon. Patreon.com/TV Tangents is where you can find our extra special episodes, like one that we have coming up, or it's probably already posted, about some weird Mars science-y stuff that happened in the 1920s.
Oh.
Teaser. That's a story that we're going to tell. So look us up and we'll see you soon.
Yes.
Wrap it up.
Wrap it up. Clink.
Clink.